This full gameplay will be at the end of the video, but first we're going to extensively cover the build that helps a noob like me pull off games like this.
Yo, what's up everybody? As you can finally back with another New World video. It has been, well, pretty much forever. So is New World AETERNUM worth playing? Well, right now I'm having an absolute blast, and that's coming from somebody who has basically given up on the game since expansion. I made a life change, moved kind of across the country, and then the expansion came, and I did not like the way they implemented it. I tried to get back into the game after that, but I just could not make content because, well, there was no content to be made. I liked running M3s. You could not find an M3 for the life of you. But New World AETERNUM came out, and I thought, well, let's give it another shot. Jumped on, tried the old mutations things. Yeah, nope, 0 lobbies, still people not running it. Yeah, nope, 0 lobbies, still people not running it. But I thought, well, they brought some new things to the table, let's check it out. They got a PvP zone. There's some interesting things in there, but nothing really too sweet. You can farm a few things, and there is a few pretty big bonuses from the PvP zone, that's for sure. And one of them is going to be incorporated into our video. But anyways, what did I find that I liked? Well, 3v3. I love the idea of 3v3 in the past, but the problem is you just could not get 3v3 matches. But now they do have cross server finally, and I have been queuing at all different times of day and night, and I have always been able to find matches, and I have been absolutely loving it. So I decided, let's make a PvP build, and I ended up settling on 2 weapons that I have basically never used in the game before: Gauntlet and Flail. Hadn't used them to the point of, well, my Flail, when I started trying to work on this build, it was only at like level 9 or 10. So I had to work on leveling it up, and I've been working on the PvP build for about a week now, and it has been absolutely killing it in the 3v3 arena. So I still got a lot to learn, there's no doubt, but we are going to show you a match that, well, it was a tough match, but yeah, we did pretty good. Definitely playing against some players that weren't extremely experienced, but hey, neither am I. Like I said, I've only been at it for about a week, but yet we're still dominating in our 3v3s. So let's show you this build that I have found that I am absolutely loving. Flail, Gauntlet, and it's all about this guy right here, this blade. Does some good damage, but it's all about self-sustainability by doing damage and stealing the other player's health. So let's talk about our build. First off, let's go over our gear. Armor. I actually got some pretty darn good setup now. And kind of the 3 main perks that I'm kind of looking for most of my pieces: health, refreshing, enchanted ward. So, and this spec here, you either want magnify, you don't want too much magnify, because if you get too much magnify, you're not going to be able to spread your points out like you need them. So it's nice that I got constitution on this piece. Health, refreshing, enchanted ward. Well, let's talk a little bit why these perks are so good. Health, well, of course, we are actually in heavy, so we're trying to have some decent survivability, so the more health we have, the better we're going to be off. Enchanted ward, 4% damage reduction from light and heavy attacks, so people are pretty much constantly attacking you with light and heavy attacks. Obviously abilities don't necessarily fall into these categories, but still massively important piece. Kind of probably the most important piece, that perk that you're looking for. Refreshing, we're not like absolutely dependent upon refreshing, but it's very nice to have. 4% perk, or you can get 4 of them total. Right now you can see we have 3 of them, but it's going to reduce max cooldowns by 4% for each piece you have. So health, refreshing, enchanted ward. This piece has magnify, which is fine as long as we don't have too many pieces of magnify. And they did add one thing. Let me show you. Go to our attributes, magnify. You can now choose which item you want to put it on, which is absolutely massive. It used to just automatically go into your highest stat, which was such a massive pain. But now you can select where your magnify goes, which is incredible. So we have this glove here, pretty darn good glove, kind of almost abyss glove here. Thorny reflection, PvP only, taking a critical hit will reflect nature damage back at your target to 7% of your weapon damage, and reduce the attacker's crit chance by 10% per 3 seconds. So every time they hit us with a crit hit, they're going to take some damage back. Pretty nice to have. And we also have enchanted ward and refreshing. Your best piece, we got Constitution on there as well, so that is very nice. And we are going to arrive at our artifact piece of armor that we are using. We're going to go ahead with our Void Dark Plate. We get increased 20% armor. Enchanted ward, of course, physical aversion, which isn't that great, but you do get some archers and stuff in, some bow users, which is going to come in helpful. So it's a nice, it's not a great perk. I'd rather have something else on there, but it's not totally wasted. And this extra 20% armor we get out of the artifact makes it well worth it. I have tried using the magnetic gauntlets instead, but they just weren't working as well for me as the Void Dark Plate on this build. So a lot of people prefer to have the magnetic gauntlets for a similar type of build, but I don't think it works quite as well with the specific niche of build we are going for. So, Void Dark Plate, and we do have it upgraded to 725. And the beautiful thing about this is we can fairly easily, with some grinding, upgrade this to 725, and then we can put the specific perk that we want to have on here. So, I put Putrefying Scream on this piece, and what does that do? Inflicts disease on hit, reducing target's incoming healing by 33% and outgoing healing by 16%. So that's massive. If we can stick it on a healer, and we're trying to take out the healer, and well, he can't heal himself quite as good, or we're sticking on DPS that's trying to get healed through the damage we're doing, and it's going to reduce his healing. Or we're just supposed to take out a DPS, and well, he tries popping a pot, but we hit him with this scream, so his pot isn't going to be quite as successful as he was hoping it was going to be. So very, very nice perk to have. This build can be successful before you get this perk, but this perk makes it that much better. So, our helmet piece. And this piece definitely really makes my build a lot stronger. I was able to be pretty successful without this piece, but once I added this slowing tether, so let's start at the bottom. We got health, we got lightning harnessing, which is, not that great. We did add a gem that does a little bit of lightning damage, so it comes in, it helps just a tiny bit, but it's kind of a dead perk, to be honest with you. But health and slowing tethering. So eventually, hopefully, I can get a better piece than this one. And we are using intelligence, so this 30 intelligence, that's perfect. But slowing tether, baleful tether, inflicts slow on hit, reducing target's movement speed by 32%. So we are using slowing tether. A lot of people might not use this, but I find it absolutely unreal. So when we are trying to hunt people down, they try to run away from us. As they get low, we hit them with this slowing tether, and we can actually catch up to them as a heavy sometimes once we slow them down a good bit. So for me, in this build, I've been having massive success, and I had a lot of success before I got this perk, but this perk just makes it just that little bit much more better. So that covers our armor. Let's talk weapons. So you can see I have this one 725 piece, and the rest it's not. One thing that's nice about the PvP stuff is you get scaled up to 700, so even the 686 piece doesn't matter, it gets scaled up to 700 once we enter the 3v3 arena. I guess we'll go over our shield. The shield is going to depend on the match, so if you can have a couple different shields that you can swap out, you get into a match and you find out there's people doing a different type of damage, well, you switch out your shield. But I don't have a ton of flame resistance in my gems, so I usually start off with this shield, Flame Shield Ward. Sturdy, doesn't do a whole lot for me, but shield defense, 5% damage reduction, enchanted ward, another 4% damage reduction to the light and heavy attacks. So pretty strong shield if we are facing any amounts of fire. Sturdy, kind of useless here. We almost never block with this build, but anyways, so occasionally we might throw in a block here and there, but yeah, let's go over our weapons here. Shimmer Mist, 725. If you can, you would like to get your weapons up to 725. It's going to help you do some extra damage. So we do have two 725 weapons, and the beauty thing about this is anybody can get these two weapons here with a little bit of grinding. The Shimmer Mist, it comes from grinding out some doubloons in the PvP zone, and actually I said anybody can get these with some grinding, but there is one caveat to that. You are going to have to do the Hive of Gorgons and complete it, I believe. I don't think there's any other way around it. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but Hive of Gorgons, you get a drop at the end and you have to use that drop to upgrade it, and the Hive of Gorgons can be a tough clear. I'll try to make a video on that. If you'd like me to, let me know. But the problem with that is if you don't have a specific group to do it, or you can't find a group that is built well for it, you're gonna have a lot of struggles in it. But it is pretty easy with the right group. So, but even with a 700 gear piece, if you can't get this up to 725, you're still gonna be very, very successful. There's not that massive of a difference between 700 and 725. So, what do we have on here? Well, this specific one, where do you get this one from? You're going to collect some doubloons from the PvP area. We're not going to go over this kind of stuff super in depth. This is mainly about our build. But then you're going to come to Cutlass Keys, and there's this little Well of Fortune, and this is where you build your Shimmer Mist. So, what are we putting on here? Well, it comes with Keen and Penetrating the Empowered. Keen's definitely not bad. There's definitely some bonuses to getting some crit hits with our build, so nothing wrong with Keen. Might not be the best possible, but we get a nice 725 gear score, or 700 if you can't get that 725. But we get Penetrating the Empowered, which is pretty strong. PvP only, critical hits against empowered players, which players are pretty much always empowered in PvP. Will have 10% armor penetration and reduce the duration of empowers on them by 7%. 1 second reduction cooldown perk, max stack of 1, of course. So every second beyond, we are going to do an extra basically 10% armor penetration. But this build is really built around this Voracious Blade. A lot of people are going to prefer to put this Voracious Blade on the armor, maybe put a different weapon perk on here, but with this specific build, it's all about the lifesteal. We're surviving off of the other player's health, so we want to maximize the lifesteal, so we are absolutely putting the Voracious Blade on our weapon. No way around it for me and for this build, and I have had massive success with it. And our second weapon, the Flail, we got the Power Stone Artifact. Heavy burden if health is above 90% attack, cost 20% weaken for 5 seconds. So this is pretty darn nice, and it's individual, so the cooldown you can hit one player and still have it apply to a second player. It doesn't automatically go on cooldown for everything. It's an individual set bonus, so that's pretty massive. A lot of times we start off of our fights with our flail outs. A lot of times we can be above that 90% threshold as we engage, and we can go ahead, we engage them, we add that extra 20% weaken, so we jump into a clump, we do 20% weaken to a few of the players that we are attacking. They're going to hurt us a whole lot less as we go in, and that's a nice little bonus. Well, actually a nice big bonus. 20% weaken, that's pretty strong. And we went ahead and we threw an Aberrail Cruel in here. Honestly, it'd probably be better to put something different, just because this is plus 10% damage against targets affected by crowd control effects. But a lot of times, as soon as we put a crowd control effect, we are switching to our Void Gauntlet, because that's our main damage dealer, and we're just kind of using this for utility. Probably would be a better one to put on here, but hey, that's what I put on. 10% damage against targets affected by crowd control. And obviously the nice thing about having these Rune Glass cases is you get these extra bonus hits, inflict poison, dealing 8% nature damage per second for 2 seconds. So you get this extra nice little 2-second tick, so an extra basically 16% weapon damage. Refreshing move honestly doesn't really come into play with our build. We're basically just using this for our abilities, and then we're switching over to our Void Gauntlet. Enchanted, once again, we're pretty much never using the lights and heavies. Occasionally we will, but this is mainly built around doing damage with our Void Gauntlet, so it doesn't really come into play. But the nice thing about this is we can specifically put the perk that we want on it. And we are going with the Burdening Smite weapon perk. PvP only. Smite hits against targets extend their active cooldowns by 35%. So that's pretty neat. It's super unique. I think it's the only perk that extends cooldowns on targets in the game. So this comes in huge, because a lot of times when we open our fights, we are going to open it up with the Vortex. Nice thing about Vortex, the ability has grit. So we go in with our Vortex, they use up their crowd control, but it comes out not affecting us because we have grit. And then we are maybe going to trip them, then we're going to hit them with our Smite, which is going to extend because of this nice little perk we have here, Burdening Smite. Hits against targets extend their active cooldowns. So one of our biggest struggles with this build is when we do get locked down. But a lot of times they're going to try and lock us down while we're under grit. They waste that skill. We hit them with Smite, and that stun that they have is on a longer cooldown yet. So that's how that skill ends up working out, or that perk ends up working out within this build. Pretty handy dandy. But let's talk, let's see, yeah, we did talk about a Void Gauntlet already, and this little guy, we haven't upgraded it yet. We definitely should think about upgrading this one of these days, but using this Brutal Heart Ruins of Grasping Vines, add some Rend, adds some Weaken, and it locks them down. So this build is all about locking people down and then trying to burn them down. So that's why I like to take the vines, locks them in place, lets us do some damage to them, and we're good to go. So our jewelry. Hard to say for sure what's going to be the best way to go with the amulet. Still working on this build, but one thing we absolutely want is Divine. You might not hear too many people say this on an amulet, is that you absolutely need to have Divine, but for this build, we absolutely do. Plus 10% health from all incoming healing effects. This build is all about our... Oh, come on, pull out. Why isn't it working? There we go. It's all about a Voracious Blade and life stealing. So that's going to give us an extra 10% health with our Divine. And of course we got health on here, increase our max health, which you can't go wrong with that. And we got Shirking Empower, PvP only. After dodging an attack, gain Empower, increasing damage dealt by 7% for 10 seconds. Duration refresher when new stacks applied. Max 3 stacks. So that means you could potentially get up to 21% extra damage. And the more damage we do, let's take a look at this again. While we are below 50% health, heal 55% of the damage dealt. So the more damage we deal, the more healing we're gonna do. So that's why this extra damage perk can be pretty nice. Another very good way to go is if you can have a damage mitigation here. Of course, have like a slash damage mitigation, maybe a fire damage mitigation. Those tend to be the two biggest concerns on facing out on the battlefield is fire and slash. So if you can have a slash damage mitigation here instead, that's going to be perfectly great. But one very nice little bonus I'm going to show you here. This little puppy here, Heart of Netquaza. I DK how to say that, so it is what it is. But anyways, you'll see here, it's only 625 gear score. So who would ever want that, right? Well, the thing is, when you go into PvP, I think it applies in Outpost Rush as well, but 3v3, gear score scaling, increase the gear score of all equipment below 700 to 700. So we don't have to worry about this 625 gear score because it scales up to 700 as soon as we enter the 3v3 arena. This is pretty much Abyss Ring IMO. So why? Leeching. This is an absolute must on your ring. Void damage. We got a Void Gauntlet. That is our main weapon that we are doing damage with. The more damage we do, the more we are going to heal. The more damage we do, the lower we're going to get the health of the other player. So these two are an absolute must. The third, well, the void damage, it can be hard to find this, but actually this one is farmable, so there shouldn't be no excuse not to have void damage and leeching because you can farm this one quite easily. And the third perk, crippling, certainly doesn't hurt. Really, we only have one slow on this build, and that is with our Baleful Tether. But just that extra little bit of slow might just help us catch that one player that's trying to escape, and it might be the difference. So I'd say these two are a must, and this third, there could be definitely some possible different options, but this is an incredibly strong ring. And well, where can you find this? I'll show you that a little bit real quick here. So we go to newworlddatabase.info, we search up this ring, and where does it drop? It drops from this dude. We click on this dude. Where is he at? Well, it shows us on the map here. So we click on the map. Come on, is it gonna, can I open it? I'll go like this, I guess. Then we zoom out, and there we go. I could show you a video of me soloing this guy, show you how to do it, but it's quite simple. Basically, you just gotta survive, run in, get there, and you're gonna get there, then you're gonna jump on the wall, de-aggro everything that follows you in, and then you jump down and you just solo the two dogs, and eventually, or the pumas, whatever they are, eventually one of them's going to drop that ring for you and you're going to be good to go. So let's get this out of the way. And our earring. Definitely a few different options you can go here, but the two main ones I have been settling on is Healthy Toast, Refreshing Toast. So obviously Refreshing Toast, consumable cooldowns is reduced by 10%. That means we get our health pots back 10% faster. There could be definitely some variable options you could go with this earring. But then we have Nimble, plus 10% stamina regeneration rate. Not an absolute must. You know, we're not blocking a whole lot, so we don't need stamina for the block, but you know, obviously it's going to help on the dodges. So for example, with the shuriken empower, after dodging attack we gain extra empower. So if we can be dodging attacks, we have extra stamina for dodging attacks, it's going to come in helpful. So obviously another thing that could potentially come in helpful is if you have Hardy on your ring, it's going to give you extra stamina as well. But there's a few different ways you can go with this earring, but this is what I'm doing. And then Healthy Toast, when you drink a mana potion, you gain 50% of your base health. So we got mana pots on our deck, and it gives us a nice little health boost when we need it. So consumables, we're taking infused health potions. I think there's a higher rate one that you can make. I think I still have to level up my Arcana or something. Regeneration serum, this is a new thing since the last time I played, but restores 400% health plus 1% max health, 5 stamina, and 2 mana per second for 20 seconds. The only problem with this is it has a really long cooldown, but it's still probably worth it. We pop this as we engage our first attack, and then, you know, we usually survive that and we'll get another chance to use this later on. We don't use enough mana to worry about this, but the extra stamina isn't bad, and obviously the extra health is very important. And then we start off with the Oak Flesh Bomb, but after the first match, if we find out there's a ton of fire or something different, maybe we switch to fire absorption potions, maybe we switch to gemstone dust. But anyway, we typically start with the Oak Flesh Bomb, and well, we adjust from there. So that covers our gear. If you got any questions on it, go ahead and drop a comment. You got anything you want me to specifically make a video on obtaining this gear, whatever, you know, drop a comment. We can try and cover some of that kind of stuff, but we're going to talk attributes. And well, let's jump right into the attributes. So the best split that I have found to work for me, I've tried a few different ones, but we're going to go 25 strength. We will be doing a ton of light attacks with this build, so we get plus 5% light attack damage. So more damage means, well, the other player gets lower health when we attack them, but we also get more healing back in return. And we're going to 200 intelligence. You know, the specific perk that we get at this point, it's very, very unimportant. So if you're like, well, I'm getting close to 200, but I'm just falling just a couple short, it's really not a big deal. It doesn't matter to hit the specific perk, but it's just damage-wise and everything else. I've found the 200 split to work very, very well for me. I've tried going higher in intelligence. I've tried going higher in focus. I just haven't had as much success in game. I've tried many different splits, and this is a split that just I've been having the most success with. So we're going to go to 200 intelligence, we're going to go to 200 focus, we're going to go to 200 con. So at 150 you're going to get plus 10% to elemental damage, so you definitely want to get to 150 plus focus, plus 20% buff duration, which is pretty huge. Any buff that we get a 20% longer of that buff, so pretty important if you can hit this 200 point on the focus. Not so absolute necessary to hit the 200 intelligence. It's just I find if you get up to 200 intelligence, 200 focus, our damage, healing all around just works out well. And in constitution we are going to 200 as well. Once you hit that 200 mark, 10% increase to physical and elemental armor. You know, since we are somewhat taking the tank role, a lot of people would think, well, that means I crank up the con, but the problem is, once you crank up the con, you're not doing as much damage, you don't get to put as much focus, you don't get to put as much intelligence, maybe you miss out on this 25 strength, and the more damage we do, well, the more life stealing we are going to be doing. So we're going to show you a pretty crazy match at the end of all of this stuff that we're covering here. But I really want to kind of go pretty in depth with the build we're doing, because I found this to be a pretty insane build. And even though I am fairly inexperienced, only been at it for like a week or so, I've been having insane luck in my 3v3s, probably winning 90% plus of my matches. But the other thing to cover here is going to be our whole weapon mastery. So let's go over the flail. 3 skills were taken. Arcane Smite, that is the one that we have our weapon perk on. Arcane Vortex and Trip. This Trip is absolutely massive, and there's a very nice synergy that works with these 3. Smite, it has grit, so we engage with this and stops us from being stunned as we engage. There is a nice perk you can get with this Arcane Vortex that's going to do some healing. You can find this on shield, so if you find a good shield with some other good options, that can definitely be a good perk to add on to it. But really, we're not built around our flail at all. It's, you know, we definitely are making very good use of our flail, but it's all about our void gauntlet, so not as important to get all of our weapon perks on our flail. So anyways, Smite, we're taking this all the way down. There's a few different ways you could potentially run this, but let's talk about it. Leap forward and strike the ground with Arcane Force, dealing weapon damage, blah blah blah. Impairment deals 10% weapon damage per second, and it weakens the target. So obviously anytime you're weakening the target, that means they're doing less damage to you. You stand toe to toe with them, they're doing less damage, and well, that's a good thing. They're not going to hurt you as bad. Smite hits reduce its own cooldown, obviously a good thing. Grants a bonus based on what type of shield. We're typically running a tower shield. We try some different ones time and time again, but gain 30% fortify for 6 seconds. So pretty nice as we are going toe to toe with some other players. And allies that enter the hazardous area gain frailty for 3 seconds. Blah blah blah, and fix a stackable weaken effect dealt by 5% per stack for 5 seconds, max 5 stacks. So I mean, in theory you could get all the way up to 25 stacks. We're not using our flail a whole lot, so we're not hitting them with a ton of these different perks. But anyways, every time we add a little extra weaken, it's going to help. Abilities and heavy attacks, hits against targets with less than 50% health, increase incoming healing by 5% and gain 10% haste. The haste is very nice. Incoming healing increases scales with focus, so we are running 200 focus, so we are getting a little bit of healing along with that. But the Vortex, nice thing about this is it has grit, so swirl the flail, dealing 4 rapid hits, blah blah blah. After the first sprint is completed, trigger a 3-meter blast of energy, granting 10% empowered for 5 seconds to all allies inside the radius. A lot of times we're kind of going in at the front solo. We're not gonna definitely always be giving this empower to our allies, but you know, it is what it is. And the ability has grit though, is kind of the main thing that we got going on here. So hitting targets 4 times with Arcane Vortex will inflict them with root, immobilizing them for 1 second, which is pretty nice. But sometimes we are canceling out of this early. We're using this to get in, and say we find a healer, we're going to go ahead and cancel early and trip that healer. So we might not always get that 4-time hit on a player. Maybe they dodge out of it, but you know, we just kind of go all the way down to the bottom with this one. Hitting target with Vortex grants stacking haste on self. You know, anytime we can get a little haste is good. A lot of times when we go in, we're trying to track down a healer, so if we get a little haste, it gives us a little speed boost to chase after that healer. And then all allies within 3 meters of player during the Arcane Vortex are cleansed of crowd control status. which can be absolutely massive. Obviously, crowd control is what wrecks players in PvP. Our allies inside are also healed for 65% weapon damage, so nice little heal. So we do a little bit of healing to the players, our teammates. Not a massive amount, but sometimes it is enough to make a difference. And then the crowd control immunity scales with focus, increasing its duration to up to 5 seconds. So we do have a kind of a medium to just above medium amount of focus with the 200. So anyways, the perks we're taking here, we are going with this one. While at or below 50% health, all flail attacks grant 3% lifesteal. While above 50%, all flail attacks extend the duration of damage over time effects by 7%. So a lot of these perks, they're not going to like come in massive because we're not using our flail a crazy amount, but we're trying to pick the ones that are going to benefit us the most with our specific build. So can be some nice little bonuses to this one while you're at or below 50% health. Say we're using an ability or whatever we're doing, we might steal a little extra health while we got our flail out. So we can't go wrong with that, and if we're below 50% health, we want all of that lifesteal we can get. And if you're above 50% health, well, you're just going to extend damage over time, and we are doing some damage over time with this build. Not a crazy amount, but you are getting some pretty good ticks with both the flail and the void gauntlet. They're not like massive large numbers, but you get some pretty good ticks out of it nonetheless. When no allies are within 5 meters, all flail attacks deal 50% more damage, and if you do have an ally within 5 meters, they gain empower. So a nice little bonus to you and your teammates. You and or your teammates. Being hit or blocking hit, we're almost never blocking with this build. So basically this comes to when we get hit from a melee attack while above 90% health, which a lot of times we open up our game with our flail, and this is going to come into effect. But when you get hit with a melee attack while above 90%, inflict a stack of impairment for 6 seconds on the attacker, dealing 10% weapon damage per second. So that means as we engage, good chance we're above 9% health, good chance we're dealing that 10% weapon damage, good chance we're inflicting that 10% weaken, and it can stack up to 3 times. So kind of a few nice little things here. And well, near 1 or more allies grant passive healing to self and all allies that heal for 16% weapon damage. So that in that one, it scales off of your equipment load. We're in heavy, so it's a pretty small radius, only a 3 meter radius effect, but we're kind of running short on skills that are extremely helpful for us, so we go ahead and we get this ultimate passive, whatever you might want to call it. But anyways, we got the trip, and the trip is absolutely unreal. This trip, it is hard. It doesn't have like a big teleport or telegraph. It's not easy to see coming, so it happens really quick, and this trip is extremely strong. Swing the flail forward, latching onto a target, dealing 50% weapon damage and knocking them to the ground. Chipping the target applies a special buff the target lasting 3 seconds. Allies that hit the affected enemy will reduce the duration of all damage over time effects on them by 10% per hit while active. So we knock down a player, and that's when we want us and our teammates to be hitting them as much as possible, so they can reduce some of that tick damage they have on them. Pretty nice. And hitting weakened targets with trip will inflict a 15% rend for 5 seconds on the target. So, you know, we do have some weakens with this build, as we talked about with some of this other stuff. So a lot of times we're going to have already hit them with some weaken by the time we hit them with this trip, and that gives nice 15% rend on the target and ourselves a nice strong fortify. So you can see how this stuff is starting to synergize together really well. We add some rends, we add some fortify, and we add some weakens, so they're not going to be able to damage us a whole lot. Between the weaken they have, the fortify we have, and the rend they have is going to allow us to do some nice little damage. And we're going to go ahead with this perk, increase your max health by 25% of your physical armor rating while the flail is equipped. The beautiful thing about this, the effect is active as long as the flail is equipped, even if the flail is sheathed. So that should be applying even when we have our Void Gauntlet out, so that's a pretty strong perk to take here. And the last perk we are taking over here, grant status effect duration modification on self based on what shield we have on. It's gonna vary on what shield we have on match to match, but we're typically rocking a tower shield. Decrease base duration of crowd control effects on player by 10%. One of the number one things that does get us with this build is crowd control. When we get stunned, we get in trouble sometimes, so we're not extremely overly heavy armor. We're not super high in constitution, I guess is what I'm saying. We do have some good armor. We are heavy. We do have our dark void plate, but we're only 200 con. We're not like some tanks that are cranking up to 300-400 con. So we do get in trouble when we get crowd controlled, but this little perk is going to reduce crowd control by 10% when we have our tower shield out. So pretty nice little perk. One thing I would like to figure out one way or another is how to add a couple pieces of freedom into this build, but for now we don't have it. So let's switch over and talk about our Void Gauntlet. Scream, Void Blade, Baleful Tether. Let's talk about it. The main thing about this build, right here, the Void Blade, and it's all about the leeching of our Void Blade. So blah blah blah, tap basic attack to perform a quick slash that deals 100% weapon damage, or hold to perform a thrust attack that deals 150% weapon damage. We are using our heavy attacks quite a bit because our heavy attacks move us forward a large amount. Both attacks inflict a disintegrate on successful hit, dealing 5% weapon damage per second. So we got a nice little tick with this. And reducing target's armor by 10% for 8 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. So we can reduce the target's armor by up to 30%. That's pretty massive. Gain Fortify on start, increasing armor by 20% for 5 seconds. So as soon as we go ahead and pull this out, we get a nice little 20% Fortify boost. So keep in mind every time you pull this out, so maybe you put it away and pull it back out again, that way you get this new stack of 20% Fortify. That's one thing I probably forget to do on occasion, is when this comes off cooldown, put it away, pull it back out to get that Fortify. But we're learning as we go. Plus 10% critical damage on Void Blade attacks. Crit hits are pretty important in this build. Successful thrust attacks heal self for 5% weapon damage per disintegrate stack on target. So that's one extra bonus to our heavy attack. But the big thing about our heavy attack is we go ahead and look how far it moves us forward. So we got some good movement with our heavy attack. You know, say you pull out your flail, it's not like that thing moves you forward when you do a heavy attack, barely at all. But that comes in pretty massive just for the movement aspect of it. But it also does some good damage and it heals us a little bit. So that heavy attack comes in huge. We are spamming a lot of light attacks, but you want to make sure you are using heavy attacks at the right time. So that covers this whole thing here. Let's talk about the Scream. Unleash a Void Infused Scream, dealing 65% weapon damage, staggering and inflicting loot. So one thing nice about this stagger is you can interrupt players. So say they're in the middle of an attack, you go ahead and Scream. 1, you're going to root them in place. 2, you're going to stagger them from doing whatever they were doing. disables enemy movement for 2 seconds. That's massive because this build is kind of all about rooting the player in place when you can. 20-second cooldown, but yeah, this comes off of cooldown pretty darn fast. So we go ahead and we scream at them, we lock them in place, and then we just go to town wrecking them. Retribution increased by 1 second on targets below 50% health. So if they're starting to get low on health, well, we just punish them that much more. Gain fortify for each enemy hit, increasing armor, so extra fortify, extra survivability, extra good. Tether. Fire a projectile dealing 100% weapon damage that tethers you to an enemy for 10 seconds. You weaken the target, empower yourself by 20%. Tether ends early if the target moves beyond 20 meters. So, one thing nice about this, if we swap weapons, we still stay tethered to them as long as we are within distance of them. Pretty strong perk, especially in the 3v3 situation. I think a lot of people sleep on the usefulness of this tether, especially with our slowing tether, but we find it quite lovely. Successful hits against the tethered target reduce other Void Gauntlet cooldowns by 5%, so that's pretty massive. We go ahead and we tether them, and then we attack them with our Void Gauntlet, and we get additional 5% cooldowns. So that's massive. Our screams, as often as we can get them off of cooldown, it's just huge, and this is one way that's going to help us do that. Plus 20% mana regeneration while the tether is active. We don't really have a problem with mana in this build, but heal for 80% weapon damage when the tether ends or is broken. So this build, it's all about sustaining by stealing health, by healing ourselves any way that we can, so that extra 80% weapon damage heal. Once the tether ends, or once they get out of range, it is pretty darn helpful. So let's talk the extra little perks that we take. Plus 10% critical chance while all abilities are on cooldown. Very strong, and we'll talk more about that. Gain Empower when casting abilities within 5 meters of an enemy, increasing damage by 10%. So if we scream at them, we are going to be within that 5 meters. There's no doubt about that. A lot of times when we tether them, sometimes they're gonna be farther away, sometimes they're gonna be a lot closer. The tether doesn't have a super long range. You'll have to play with that and kind of figure out that range a little bit, but plus 5% cooldown reduction on all abilities when successfully hitting enemies inflicted by 3 or more debuff sticks. And players are constantly being debuffed, so this is going to come into play pretty often. We are going to be debuffing them a lot ourselves, and the cooldown reduction is going to bring back our scream, going to bring back our tether, make sure our void blade is coming back off cooldown if we want to swap it off and back on again and gain our fortify back. So pretty massive there. Plus 10% critical chance well above 50% health. Crit hits come in pretty strong. Plus 5% cooldown reduction on all abilities on a critical hit. So this is one of the places where we really like to get those crit hits. We get extra cooldown. And Harvest Essence, we never use this. We don't. On critical hit, heal. Equal to 50% of damage done. So another massive reason why the crit hits, when we can get them, are pretty massive. So a lot of people love to use the gloves that I showed you earlier because you get a lot of crits and that means extra damage. But I've just found so much better luck with the Void Dark Plate, just testing between the two. And we're not taking any passives on this excuse me, on this side except this one here. Plus 10% base damage on successful ranged basic attacks against targets with an active debuff. So we're very rarely ever going to be using this. We're very rarely using ranged attacks here, but occasionally a player's trying to get away at like 1 health. We'll maybe try and fire some shots at them. And well, you can't go wrong. And we do have to take one or the other. Plus 5% mana. We don't have a mana problem, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take this one. We can't get this Baleful Tether until we take either this, or this. So we go ahead here, Deadly Range, and we take this one down to the bottom. And we already talked about that, so that covers our Void Gauntlet build. So that pretty much covers our build here. Went over our weapons, armor, just about everything. But let's talk one more thing. What are we taking as we enter a fight? We're going to go ahead and we're going to take a Desert Sunrise. Reduce the duration of dots damage over time by 17.5% for 40 minutes. So every time we enter the PvP arena, we're going to go ahead and take a Desert Sunrise. We're going to take whatever food is going to get us up to our thresholds. I'm typically taking focus based on my equipment and whatnot, but you're going to want to go ahead and get some 48 attribute food. It's very expensive, but the thing about it is it lasts for an infinite amount of times once you are using it in the 3v3 arena. So you buy it once and it's good forever inside of the 3v3 arena only. So we're popping that, or not the banana bird, we're popping the Desert Sunrise, we're popping a 48 attribute food. We are going to go ahead and pop a powerful Honing Stone. And that's about it for our consumables. But that covers our build. One thing I guess we can talk about that we have not yet is gems. And well, you can look down here at what we got: physical and elemental resistance. Like I said, the two main things that tend to get us is slash damage or fire damage. Slash damage tends to be the main one. Fire damage is the other one that can kind of get to us. Occasionally thrust damage is gonna, you run into a good spear, bow player. That can affect us, but it just happens less often. So we stack quite a few slash gems. Slash ward, 5% slash damage absorption. We're throwing a couple of these onyxes on here, which just add 2.5% general, which is going to help us get a little bit of strike damage resistance, going to help us get a little extra thrust damage resistance. And we're throwing one fire gem in here, one ruby. I could probably go with a couple of them, but like I said, we usually start off with our flame shield, ward shield. So anytime we bring out our flail, we're going to get that fire resistance up to 20%. But say after our first match, we're struggling against a bunch of fire staffs, because there's a lot of fire staff and great axe users. So the great axe is going to do slash shield, but their fire staff is going to do fire damage. So maybe if we happen to have an amulet with some flame protection on it, we can go ahead and throw that in after the first match. The only problem with this is if you can find amulets with the same exact attributes, that's beneficial, because as soon as you switch out of your amulet, like this one, you can see it's intelligence, this one is constitution, and it's going to throw our stats all off, and you just don't have a whole lot of time to go switching your attributes in between matches. So ideally, if you are swapping it with a same attribute amulet, but you could try and mitigate some of that by quickly changing the food that you're taking. But you can see here I got like a full flame set, but it just tends not to work out too well because the attributes are so whack compared to my main build. But maybe occasionally I'll go ahead and swap out a couple pieces of fire if I really feel I need to for that match. But Or if you want to get really into it, you can buy gems and swap out the gems mid-match, but that can get pretty darn expensive. So typically I'd just say, well, live with it for that match and move on to the next one. A lot of times this build is strong enough that we'll still do perfectly just fine without it. So anyways, we do have a pretty killer match here to show you, so let's jump into it.
One valiant warrior against the odds!